Marilyn Monroe without makeup, 1955. This rare photograph, taken in an informal setting, shows her not as a Hollywood diva, but as the simple, slightly tired woman she was in real life. This isn't just a mountain of boxes, but 5 megabytes of data on a hard drive in 1966. To transport the amount of information that today fits on the tip of a finger, a whole truck was required. A banquet for French fencing veterans who suffered severe facial injuries in World War I. They deliberately did not hide their injuries, gathering together to support each other and show the world that even after the horrors of war, one can maintain dignity and the will to live. The great helmsman Mao Zedong in 1961, demonstrating his vigor and health during a swim. These photographs were part of state propaganda, proving to the people that their leader was full of strength while the country was experiencing the consequences of the catastrophic Great Leap Forward. Macau in 1964, and now. In half a century, the quiet harbor with fishing junks has transformed into an Asian Las Vegas, a giant gambling center with skyscrapers and casinos, completely changing its appearance. Christmas dinner of British soldiers in 1916, right in a shell crater on the Western Front. While Christmas trees were being decorated back home, here the holiday table was made of ammunition crates, and the only decoration was a small wooden cross. Phoebe Cates, one of the most desired actresses of the 80s. Her role in the film Fast Times at Ridgemont High and the famous pool scene forever inscribed her in the history of youth cinema and made her an idol for a whole generation. The airport in Sacramento, the 60s, this Googie-style design, huge American cars, and carefree atmosphere. This is what California looked like in the golden age of aviation, when every flight was a celebration. A typical Burger King and a yellow Dodge Coronet taxi in New York, 1974. This bright, almost garish design and giant cars are symbols of an era when gasoline was cheap and modesty was not in fashion. A supermarket parking lot in California, 1959. These giant Chevrolets and Cadillacs with their chrome details and sweeping lines are the quintessence of the American dream, when gasoline was cheaper than water and the car was the ultimate symbol of freedom. Baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. He was not just a great athlete, but also the husband of Marilyn Monroe, and their tumultuous romance, full of love and jealousy, became one of the main stories of Hollywood's golden age. Fashion designer Pierre Cardin, surrounded by his sketches of uniforms for nurses of the future, created in 1970. While the whole world was listening to Jimi Hendrix and wearing bell-bottoms, Cardin was already dressing medical staff for Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey. An American soldier in Vietnam, 1968. The photographs of his beloved girlfriend attached to his helmet are not just sentimentality, but the only thread connecting this young man to home and a peaceful life. Los Angeles police officers on Harley-Davidson motorcycles. This photograph, taken by the legendary photographer Loomis Dean, is not just a parade, but a demonstration of power and order in a city that has always been full of temptations and dangers. Raquel Welch, as a nun in the film Bluebeard, 1972. Even in such a seemingly modest outfit, she remained one of the main sex symbols of her era, an Iranian woman against the backdrop of typical apartment buildings, the 60s. This photograph, taken before the Islamic Revolution, is a reminder of a lost world, where Iran was a secular country and women could dress in a European style. Swedish actress Inger Nilsson, who played Pippi Longstocking, during a visit to Amsterdam in 1972. Despite her worldwide fame, she remained a one-role actress, dedicating her life to working as an ordinary secretary. Paul McCartney and George Harrison at the airport in New York during the Beatles' first visit to the USA in 1964. In Paul's hands is a magazine with Little Richard on the cover, one of his main idols whose music inspired him to become who he became. The transportation of the space shuttle prototype Enterprise through California, 1977. To move this giant spacecraft, entire highways had to be closed, creating huge traffic jams in an era before mobile phones. Marlon Brando before and after applying makeup for the role of Vito Corleone in The Godfather. To transform the 47-year-old actor into an elderly Don, makeup artists used special dental prosthetics and complex makeup that took 3 hours to apply each day. Tourists climbed the Great Pyramid of Giza, 1875. In those days, there were no prohibitions, and anyone could climb to the top of the Great Pyramid to enjoy a view that had previously been accessible only to gods and pharaohs. Hooverville in New York's Central Park, 1932. These wretched shacks, built from trash by the unemployed, were a bitter mockery of President Hoover's promises, and a symbol of the despair that gripped America during the Great Depression. The Signal Hill oil field in California, 1937. This forest of oil derricks covering an entire city became a symbol of the oil boom that forever changed the economy and landscape of Southern California. Captain Harry Truman in France, 1918. Long before becoming president and giving the order for the atomic bombing, he was a simple artillery officer who went through the hell of the First World War. The last veteran of the American Civil War, Bill Lundy, poses with an F-100 Super Sabre fighter jet. This photograph is a symbolic meeting of two eras, a soldier who fought in the 19th century and a supersonic aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Gregory Peck on set, 1959. Even during breaks between takes, he remained the epitome of elegance, and his impeccable style and aristocratic manners made him one of Hollywood's leading intellectuals. Hollywood Boulevard, the early 60s. These giant cars, neon signs, and palm trees. This is what Los Angeles looked like in its heyday, when the city was not just a city but a symbol of the American dream. Home milk delivery, the 40s. In an era before supermarkets and plastic packaging, the milkman would leave fresh milk in glass bottles on the doorstep every morning, and this ritual was an integral part of American life. Two literary giants, Ernest Hemingway and Roald Dahl, on a walk in London, 1944. At the time, Dahl was a military pilot, and Hemingway was a war correspondent, and this meeting of two future classics took place against the backdrop of the raging Second World War. Carrie Fisher and David Prowse in the Darth Vader costume, at a photo shoot for Rolling Stone magazine in 1983. This photograph, where Princess Leia poses with her main enemy, became one of the most famous and ironic in the history of Star Wars. Actress Jane Mansfield dances with a soldier during a tour of American military bases in 1961. For the young men serving far from home, the arrival of the era's main sex symbol was a real event and a breath of peaceful life. The launch of the Windows 95 operating system, which became a true cultural phenomenon. People stood in line all night to be the first to buy a box of floppy disks, and this happy customer is the perfect embodiment of the computer boom that swept the world in the 90s. Mark Hamill with his wife Marilu, 1978. Just a year after the release of Star Wars, he was at the peak of his fame, but unlike many stars, he remained faithful to his high school sweetheart, with whom he is still together today, Ava Gardner, and her first husband, actor Mickey Rooney. Their marriage, which took place when she was just 19, lasted a little over a year, but it was he who opened the door for her to big Hollywood, where she soon became one of the main stars. October 24th, 1901, 63-year-old teacher Annie Edson Taylor, next to the barrel in which she became the first person in the world to go over Niagara Falls. She undertook this deadly stunt not for fame, but to secure her old age, but ultimately died in poverty. The World Championship of Pole Sitting in Holland, 1971. This absurd type of sport, where participants had to sit on a pole for as long as possible, was popular in Europe and America and drew crowds of spectators. Baghdad in the 50s. These bright American cars, wide streets, and modern architecture are a reminder that before the series of wars and destruction, Baghdad was one of the most prosperous and secular cities in the Middle East. Empty shelves in a Soviet store in the last years of the USSR's existence. This photograph is a symbol of the total deficit and economic collapse that became one of the main reasons for the breakup of the huge country. The presentation of the world's first compact disc in 1979. A Philips engineer holds a small, shiny disc in one hand and a huge vinyl record in the other, clearly demonstrating to the world that the era of analog sound is coming to an end. Flight attendants in the cabin of a Boeing 747 in the 60s. In the golden age of aviation, the flight attendant's uniform was a work of design art, and they themselves were not just service personnel, but the face of the airline and a symbol of prestige. This is not just a peasant family, but a Finnish baby box. A box with everything necessary for a newborn, which the Finnish government gave to every family. This program, launched in the 30s, helped to dramatically reduce infant mortality and became a symbol of the state's social care. A stockbroker tries to sell his luxury car for $100 in cash after the Wall Street crash in 1929. This photograph, where a man who was rich yesterday is ready to give away his car for a pittance, became one of the most vivid symbols of the Great Depression.